Let's see. So that's me on Twitter. My name is William Largent. I am a threat researcher at Talos. So what that means is that I'm a nerd, all right? I don't know anything about sales, and I know nothing about product, and so now everybody's like, well, why the hell are you here? And that's a great question. Ask the core people, I don't know. Look, they don't let us out of the cage that often to come talk to people, so when we get the chance, we just, come and we look at normal people. It's really fascinating. And what y'all live your lives like everything's okay, and all that kind of stuff like that, right? So, okay. This goes with the sound of your voice that you hear, if you don't really. So I've been at Cisco about 15 years. I was part of an acquisition. So I started in the MSSP environment side of things, doing analytics on, IDS logs, firewall logs, stuff like that. Moved up to problem management. From there, I kind of, so who's heard the axiom, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room? Anyone ever heard that? Yeah, so I started kind of tilting my career that way, mostly because I was tired of working for dumbasses, right? So that goes really well when you're talking to people who have worked with you in the room. Last week I had that one. I was like, yeah, but I'm right. So I moved up to Cisco signature team, so I worked on writing IPS signatures and all those different things like that. And then from there, once we acquired Talos, I moved there as fast as possible. Now I am never, ever, ever going to be the smartest person in the room. Mostly I just hope that no one notices I'm there, right? And just kind of hang out, whatever. So Talos is the threat research organization within Cisco. We do threat research, right? So we have 6 teams that that I'll kind of highlight later, and we research vulnerabilities and research exploitation and all those different things like that, right? So basically, let's get into it. Now, I've been told that everybody here, I kind of wanted to level set where we were, and I was told that everybody has a nonlinear dynamics, at least as their background in mathematics, so that's where we're gonna go with these things. Okay, let's talk about the threat landscape, right? So, oh, by the way, I love doing these talks now because I used to do a lot of social engineering talks, which were well received. But when you do social engineering talk, when you're done, no one will talk to you or even make eye contact anymore. You go over to get coffee and everybody's like, oh, good talk, and then they scatter, right? So these are, because you say like, oh, how many of you had Bluetooth enabled this morning? And everybody panics. And then how many joined the Wi-Fi that I turned on earlier that you thought was the hotel Wi-Fi? And everybody panics. And now everyone's panicked even though I didn't do any of those things, maybe, right? Okay, so how many people think, when you think of hackers, you think of the dude who plays World of Warcraft and he goes down to his grandmother's basement and he's pounding the code red Mountain Dew and pounding Doritos and all that, right? Okay, that guy does exist, right? It's not who we're really dealing with, right? That stereotype exists for a reason, but what we're really dealing with is criminals, right? So when you think of the data that you have and the data that you're protecting or your customers are protecting or what you want to do with your security posture, you need to think of the Yakuza, the South American drug cartels, right? The mafia, because that's what we're talking about. These are exceedingly well-funded groups that recruit smart people. They have 24/7 contacts, we know because we've called them. They have agile architecture meetings. They have calendar invite, the whole deal, right? So that's what you're talking about. So like when we took down one single node of Angler through Limestone Networks, and it was super conservatively estimated that that node was dealing about $38 million of revenue. For that single node, really, I think it's more logical to think about 50 million or so for that one single node of Angler. How many networks have $50 million a year to spend on their protections and people? Not a lot, right? You can see where that happens. And that's all tax-free, so you can also see why they do this, right? So I think having that at the forefront of your mind when you begin thinking about your posture, your strategy, or whatever you're doing, and at the end, is really important, okay? Okay, so does everybody know what a CVE is? I'm gonna guess some people don't, so we'll go through it real quickly. A CVE is just a number assigned to a vulnerability. So everybody knows what Microsoft Tuesday is, right? So there's new vulnerability and say word. That vulnerability gets a number identifier. That's a CVE. Okay, so in the history of the program, there's only been about 86,000 CVEs. I feel like I wrote more Microsoft SIGs than that alone while on SIG team, right? But, okay, so the next graph, I'm going to break a lot of rules, and it's going to be slide number 1 and showing you that I'm the craziest person that presents here today. So with that, it's this. The graph is going down. We know in slide 101 that a graph going down is not the scary graph. It's the one that goes up, right? But I've got it going down. So how does that scare you? Okay, so how many people how many people remember Code Red or NIMDA? Yeah, the same group of people, if you made a Venn diagram for how many people remember Code Red, NIMDA, how many have kids and how many are exhausted, it's just a circle, right? Those are the same set of hands. Okay, so those kind of things, those kind of exploits have gone away. Back in the old days with NIMDA and Code Red, you could take any browser on any device, go to the web server that's vulnerable, type in a URL with the commands at the end, and actually get root access on a server, right? Which I've heard allegedly was really super fun, right? I don't know personally that I've never done that, but you could do that. So those kind of things are going away, right? Like, we're getting better holistically as a broader internet at writing more secure code, and there's more people auditing the code, and on down the line, right? But all of these things, including threat research, is driving an evolution in malware, right? So as those things go away, they have to get smarter with the code they write. They have to get a ton better about obfuscating that code and hiding it in different places. And they have learned to get a lot more quiet, right? The breaches that are most impressive are the ones that no one ever knows about, ever, as including the people that are owned, right? But this constant evolution, now that we've driven them to, as attackers, leads us to have to evolve as rapidly as well, right? That's how the evolution works. We understand this because it's a scientific model, right? Reproducible. Okay. At Talos, we have an unprecedented view into the threat landscape. We see 1.5 unique malware samples every day. 86,000 CVEs, 1.5 unique malware samples every day, right? There's a little gap in there. That's kind of the sweet spot, right? Okay, you can see how terrifying that is to an extent, but it also speaks to the kind of data set that we have internally, right? Now, this slide, I'm not going to read it, mostly because people who read slides to me make me stabby, right? I hate that very much, so I'm going to highlight the things that are really important to you. So the things that I think are really important to call out, first is the 250 plus researchers. It's really about 270 now, I believe, is where we're at. That's full-time researchers. That's not a number that's bumped up with HR staff or anything like that, right? So that's people that are reverse engineers, spam gurus, web reputation expert guys, things like that, right? Those are people 24/7 all over the world that are diving into this mountain of data that we have. When I talk about a mountain of data, I talk about 600 to 650 billion emails a day that we look at, right? There's only 7.4 billion people on Earth, and a small percentage of them are actually using the internet every day. So basically what we're saying is we're reading your email, so stop, because it's not good. No one wants to see that, right? I'm still waiting for legitimate email. I just delete mine as they come and then figure out if anyone's really mad, they'll call me. And then I won't answer. It's great. And 20 billion web threats that we block a day. Again, you know, that's like 3 blocks for every single person on the earth, right? So what does that data mean, right? There's a lot of things. So first, it means talent retention. It's really easy to recruit at Talos, not just because we have an awesome work environment and a bunch of smart people, which is huge, but also because we have that data, right? The same group of people who has kids, right? Where are the kids going to go play? They're going to play where down the street where you can raise and lower the goal with one hand so they can dunk on it, and Xboxes and PlayStations, where the cool toys are, right? We have the coolest toys. So if you're into cutting-edge crypto analysis, or you love tracking the craziest new exploit kit activities or anything like that, we have that data, right? So you combine a good work environment with all the fun toys, and you can see how easy it is to retain talent and attract talent, right? That's one part of it. The other part is specifically time to detection. How many people have heard that when people talk about different things in marketing? The time to detection, has anyone heard it? Yeah, a few people have. How many truly understand what they talk about when they talk about it, or have you just heard it just like the phrase big data? Right? And when they say big data, how many people turn their glaze over? Just me. You are a bunch of liars. Terrible at this. I'm a social engineer. I know you're lying. Okay, so Gartner released a study a couple years ago that said basically that the industry standard time to detection was 200 days. That meant a 0-day hit, 200 days passed, and then there was detection. I mean, that's crap, right? And so everyone panicked, and the next year, over time, our industry got down to about 100 days. Ours, in those same time periods, the first year was 36 and a half hours versus 200 days. And then it was like 13 hours. And our most latest, I guess when they did it again, ours was 6.5 hours, right? Which there's several things. First of which, if ours was 36 and a half hours and industry standard was 200 days, and you know how averages work, someone is not detecting it ever. It's the null set or whatever, right? The infinite. Like they're just like, yeah, forget it. Can you buy our box? It's great. It has lights. This one has a blue light. Oh, and then, okay, so time to detection is important, right? So the only way that you can have the time to detection like that is to be very fast and have a lot of data, look at it quickly. You're not farming all these different things out. You're not buying all these different threads and going through it and all this stuff, right? Like, we have the active data. We have the smart people looking at it. That time to detection is huge, right? And then, so let's just go with the next one real quick first. Okay, so the threats don't go away, and how do we address it? My slide used to say the bad guys don't take a vacation, and it pisses me off, right? Now, the problem with that was that during the chasing the angler around like a whack-a-mole all over the internet, they actually disappeared for 3 days. The Nikur's botnet disappeared. Their malware campaigns disappeared. Their malvertising campaigns disappeared. Ransomware, it all just disappeared, right? So I like to picture them down at Ibiza at some trance festival with the glow sticks and the, and the hair, and because they're Euro guys, and so it makes me laugh, and that's what I care about is my happiness. So, okay, so if y'all take anything away from this today, this is a nice general understanding of what Talos is, because that's kind of why I'm here, right? So hopefully this one, it clarifies it for you. Talos is the blue shield in the middle. We're feeding that threat intelligence out to all those devices, right? So anything within the Cisco security portfolio is being fed threat intelligence from Talos. Why that's really important in a real-world example is, well, there's a lot of different ways. Like, if we see a spam campaign, let's say in Japan, that has, let's say, 1,100 command and control servers on the other side of it or something, right, that are landing pages for it, right? But let's say they also run malvertising campaigns that start hitting in Europe 7 hours later, right? If we have written detection that blocked those IP addresses from our mail, from spam mail instance, and they start blocking for the malvertising campaign, those are two different data sets that are helping each other out, right? That's how that works, that mesh topology, and that's why, like, having that threat intelligence spread across the platform is really important. Because even though it's a malvertising campaign here, that landing page could be used several different ways, right? Bad ads, ransomware, whatever it takes, right? And email links, and go on down the list. Okay, so now I've got an org chart, right? Because I had the downward slide, and so now I have an org chart, and everybody's like, why the hell would I care about your org chart? And it's a fair question. Cisco Talos is divided into 6 groups, okay? All 6 of our groups report to one person, which is Matt Wachinski, who is a legend, and then he reports to Marty Resch, who wrote Snort in his garage, right? And just right, so that's the father of Snort. By the way, if you're a tech guy and you like to dazzle people with tech to get out of a meeting because it kind of grinds to a halt when you get technical and they glaze over and then you can leave, which is my favorite strategy, you can't do that if your boss's boss wrote Snort. Because he's like, oh, really? And you're like, shit, I forgot, right? So just as a tip, if you come work at Talos, know that you can't get out of a meeting that way. So, by the way, secondary to that, let's see a show of hands who hates most meetings. Every hand should be raised. If your hand's not raised, you're lying. Okay, so I will say that on the back table, I don't know if they have any left, but there's some Talos fidget cubes. Nothing helps you get through a meeting more than sitting there messing with your Talos fidget cube because, trust me, it works. Okay, so the 6 teams, right? Now that I've spent time on that. Let's give a real-world example. So let's say it's 4 years ago. I was working on the signature development team at Cisco. By the way, I had nothing to do with Mars, so nobody blame me for that. Okay? Okay, but I did work in the same room with them, so I'm slightly culpable. Okay, so there's a new Silverlight vulnerability, okay? Silverlight, we love our Netflix, we love our Outlook web interface, all those different things, right? So it's a good vector. I pull apart the malware, I find some failure in the code. I can write a signature for it. But I also realized that I could write some changes to the engine, and therefore we could catch it at the engine level before the signature's ever engaged. More better memory utilization, more SIG efficacy, all those different things. It's a win, 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 right? So I take those changes to the development team, 3 lines of code. Say, hey, if we update the engine with this, we'll catch these things. It'll be pre-SIG. Everybody wins. Yay. And they say, OK, great. We'll put it into our change, whatever, windows and go forward and audit that, blah, blah. OK, that team reported to a different reporting structure all the way up to the vice presidential level. So literally, even though we're working in the same room on the same device, we didn't report even to the same vice president, much less director on down. It helped me understand real quickly how things got to 200 days or 100 days or whatever, right? Same thing happens now. The rules guys get it. They tear it apart. They make those same changes. They go to the engine development team. They're like, hey, guys, we can do this. Engine development goes up to Wojcinski and says, hey, should we push this out? He says, yes, we push it out. It's minutes instead of months. Right? Device performs better, rules work better on down the line. That's real world how that happens. And no one else can compete with us there. It's just how it is. Threat intelligence team, they take all that mountain of data and turn it into actionable content for the rest of our teams. I don't know how they do it. A lot of it is math that doesn't look like math anymore, right? The veritable machine learning and big data scary stuff. They actually do it, and we have like cool ASN information about how they've done it that you can check out on our blog. Detection and research are the rules guys that you all think of when you think of threat research and Talos reverse engineers and all that stuff. Open source community, we give back like crazy. I actually have another slide on it. Outreach is my team. There's some brilliant people within it, so don't judge it just based on me. There's really great people working here. And vulnerability and research is the one I was going to talk about real quickly. These are the guys that are zero-day hunters, right? So everyone in Talos is a little sketchy. I mean, let's be honest, I'm the one that they send out to people, so can you imagine what the rest of us are like, right? So, and these guys are the sketchiest, and I say that with all the love in my heart because they do amazing work, right? They're zero-day hunters, right? So they're finding vulnerabilities before the bad guys. We responsibly disclose everything with vendors. So I'm gonna show you an example. And so now I've posted code, and now half the room has puckered, right? And this is my third crazy person slide. But it's pretty easy. We're gonna go over this real quickly. I'm just gonna show you, there's a couple of blog posts on this one, but I was just gonna show you kind of an example of what vuln discovery does, right? This is an Apple vulnerability. It's in a video card. The white box is the actual vulnerability, and it's a denial of service at this point, right? So for a troll like me, this is great, because I send a link, you click it. By the way, OS X users click the link how often? Every time, right? Because they're safe, right? There's no viruses for Mac or whatever you want to say, right? So they'll click it every time, which falls right into the troll's hands because I send a link, crash your video card, you have to reboot. I send you a picture later, it has the link inside it, crashes your video card, you have to reboot. I send you an audio file and crash you see how this works, right? For me, it's funny. For them, it's really bad. I don't care. Again, like I said, it's me that I care about. But the researcher that found this one, his name's Schweiter, and I do love it very much. He found the technique that was popular way back in the dark ages of 2005 on Windows machines. And he figured out that there was a way to make the same thing, a similar concept work within OS X on the kernel protections. And so that's why you see this kernel address leaked. Okay? So once you can leak that memory, he figured out how to own that piece of memory, and from there, he can inject stuff into that memory, which gives him who am I root. Now you have remote code execution, right? So now you send the link, they crash the computer, but now I have shell on it, right? These are the kind of things you'll see that you would see. This would not be some worm thing, right? This would be saved for a high-end target, right? Very cool stuff. There's 2 blog posts on this one specifically, but we have just a ton of stuff if you look up the vulnerability spotlights. They're really cool, and they also link to their white papers, which go super in-depth as to how the memory spray was done and all that stuff, right? It's fantastic, so I highly recommend you checking those out. The open source community, we give to it like crazy. Obviously, people panicked when Cisco purchased SourceFire because of Snort, but we've given more money than ever to that stuff. And we've also released a bunch of tools for free. Highly recommend you guys familiarize yourself with Locky Dump if you have email people within your company, because that helps you identify whether you were part of just a widespread Locky campaign or if you were targeted. That's really important to understand, right? Knowing your own environment is important. Tesla Crypt was cool. We found a failure in the way they did their crypto and could unencrypt things for people without paying the ransom, which causes them to cry on their forums, which is hilarious because we feast on the delicious tears of their agony on that one. First is really cool if you have a team of threat researchers, and they may or may not be aware of this, but First is a plugin for IDA Pro, which is what you use to reverse engineer malware. It's a community-driven thing, so once we see something, we throw it in a template, and so now if this particular, like say, packer and this set of memory jumps happens, you can use this template and go through it again so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel each time you go. And the community adds to it, so as the community adds more things, everyone benefits by going faster through this stage of stuff. MBR filter is really cool because what that does is it keeps people from writing to the master boot records. Everybody know what that is? That's what boots before your OS, right? So if you have a ransomware that writes to the master boot record, which is a lot of them, if you have MBR filter, it won't write to it, it won't be successful. It's free, it's open source, download it, run it. I don't know why it's not on everyone's computer already, right? Okay. We have a podcast. If you have a long drive or a train ride or anything like that, I highly recommend you listening to it. If for no other reason than Nigel Houghton and Matt Olney are on it, and anytime either of the two of them talk about anything, you should be listening because they're both awesome and hilarious at the same time. You can get it on iTunes or Google Play or whatever. It's fantastic. Really funny. They had a really good one the past, I think the last one or the one before last was when they talked about handling incident response the right way versus perhaps the Equifax way. By the way, I saw that brought up. Did anyone notice that they got hacked again? And their homepage was forwarding to a malicious Flash downloader, I think today or yesterday. So that's really good. Apparently, they didn't go to core and prepare for win, right? They did not. Okay. Nerdery ahead. Now everybody's super panicked because they thought it was nerdy already, right? But we're going to talk about some threats here real quick. CC cleanup. This is the one that we just recently released. It was a big news. People, even like CNN and stuff, were calling Craig to try to get him on TV and stuff, which I find hilarious. But anyway, so this is the next in the line of what's called supply chain attacks, right? So Petya and Yetya that we talked about before, Kaspersky got done on their own, Havex, a lot of these things happen. And basically what these things do is they take advantage of the trust relationship that's already built. So if they can get into a software distributor's back end and add the malware to the trusted source, they can then serve it out to everyone, right? And tons of people use Avast AV. And so this was how CC cleanup worked, right? So we were beta testing a new engine with AMP, and basically we found this new exploit within the Avast code, right? So what had happened is they had owned the systems, the back-end systems on Avast, and they had actually owned even the certificate authority. So the packager on the back end that was putting the packages together to send out to everyone, they owned those machines. So they added malware with their backdoor to it at that level. So as your AV got the new download, you installed a new backdoor, right? Which, by the way, Avast came out and said you don't have to reformat and Windows, just go ahead and upgrade to the new thing. But I don't know who or why they said that, but if you were one of them, please reformat your computer because that backdoor is there, right? Like, so let's be smart about things. So these are really, really interesting attacks. If you didn't read the Nyetia blog post, I highly recommend you do that. And then also listen to the podcast on it because Matt Olney's team was working directly with that a lot, and he gives a lot of really interesting background as to how Nyetia worked at the time, and specifically how the team dealt with that in real time with that. And it was really fantastic because, again, that's the Ukrainian deal. And so you get a really cool perspective on how things work from that interdiction side of the house, right? So this is the delay routine within it. So the way that they wrote these backdoors is it would come in and have a delay routine, right? And you can see the delay for seconds. This was checking to see if it was the admin, right? And these are the tools as you're reverse engineering, you can see it. And then essentially you see the process running, right? And so that's how they added this backdoor in through, and now they reach out to their command and control infrastructure and own your computer and then turn it into whatever they want to, right? So this is a process flow, and it's pretty standard to what you think it would be, right? It determines if it's admin. It runs that system check. The reason it runs those timers and all that stuff, does anyone have an idea why it does those things? Okay, so it runs for 600 seconds, 601 seconds, and it checks if there were 600 seconds actually elapsed on the computer. Why? And that's because it's trying to evade sandbox detections, right? And virtual machines and all that stuff like that, because it doesn't want you researching it. So that's put in place not because the end user is going to figure it out, but so that threat researchers have a harder time automating the research into the malware. Okay? So these are people that understand not only the red team aspect of it, but the blue team and how the blue team's going to react, and then write in changes to make so that they're making it harder to research that malware, right? Okay, here's the malware as it connects to the IP address. If it's unable to connect, it creates a DGA list. Does everybody know what DGA stands for? Domain Generated Algorithm, right? It's just a mathematical sequence that creates a domain, right? And that's why when you see these malware, it's like fzqrxt.xyz, which is everyone's favorite website, right? So that's how that happens, is the DGAs. By the way, when you break like locky dump and stuff and you start blocking domains before they're stood up, that's another time where they'll cry on their crimeware forums because you start blocking domains as they stand them up. And so they stand up 1,000 domains and it costs them X amount of money and they're all blocked anyway and they get real, and it's funny. Love that stuff, right? Okay, this is what it looked like in Umbrella, OpenDNS, right? You guys back there nodding their heads and saying, yeah, everybody nod their heads. So what you see here is them testing and then running the exploit activity within this domain. We can see another domain, if I can use the clicker, right here, and you can see that there's a lot of activity, and then what happens in September? Just goes away because they're rolling their domains across so that it takes longer for people to find and find them, and so they change their DGAs. And then you can see what happens is this domain was stood up and nothing was happening, and then September kicked off and they took over, right? And then finally you see this one, which was a long-standing one, and this is actually the rest of the world catching up and doing research. So we'd been doing it forever, and then this is everybody saying, oh, well, shit, Talos is in on something, let's go find out what it was. So that's it from the Umbrella scenario. Okay, so let's go through SamSam. I love this one because often we talk about scaring you with super technical stuff, like the CCleaner was really, a technical, highly inventive attack and stuff like that. This is low tech and really funny for a lot of different reasons, right? This is the ransomware that hit hospitals and schools. Everybody kind of remember that, right? So there were several interesting things about this. This is what it looked like. Okay, so first it was using a 6-year-old tool called Jay Bexley, which, by the way, if you're going to write a piece of software for pen testers, JBoss, exploitation, Jay Bexley, do better than that, right? Have a better naming strategy than just jamming it together, right? It's not 1984. And then, so they took advantage. So these malware authors, I don't think they realized how successful this campaign would be, right? Because they thought that most people would have their networks segmented properly, right? So that you stop that rapid, widespread flow in that code red NIMDA kind of style where you scan the internal network and pop hosts. Well, this was super successful, right? Okay, so they didn't even have a command and control infrastructure, right? Which actually worked in their favor to an extent because some of them, like CryptoWall 4, if you read that blog post from us, actually was blocked from installing if you blocked their command and control infrastructure or if you even had network lag and couldn't get out to it, right? So these guys didn't. Instead, you had a link, and it was to this, which, and the old people will know what I'm talking about. This is like the oldest warboard-looking board I've ever seen. I can actually hear the modem in my ear when I see this page from, you know, fire up Netscape to take a look at it. This is how you would get your ransom. You would put the link in here in the email, and then they would send you the link to decrypt it, right? Which means that they had to physically go in, read it, click the link, copy, paste. You can imagine how slow this is. And obviously, they didn't think they'd have the kind of success that they did, right? But then they did some more really fun, clever things that I thought I'd highlight here. Okay, so first of all, if you're going to be a bad guy, be a good one. They misspell Bitcoin directly above where they spell it correctly. God dang, man. Come on. So 1 Bitcoin, but let's say you had 65 hosts popped in your environment. They would Costco bundle it for you for 22 Bitcoin, the low, low price, right? So they're the kinder, gentler criminal. Now they're misspelling it all over, but still spell it correctly elsewhere. Just, they're a disaster, right? Okay, this is what it looked like in AMP on day 1, because it was a 6-year-old exploit. Of course it's bad, right? It was nothing hidden about it. They rolled their own crypto inside it to make the ransomware, but outside of that, it was a 6-year-old vulnerability and exploit. This exploit tool was, Jay Bexley, was used by pen testers, and so you could just go to GitHub, download it, put an IP address in there. Everyone in this room could have popped boxes with that, right? Just that no one would have a public-facing 6-year-old vulnerable host, right? All right? Wrong. Incorrect. They had this many. In April, we outlined it, and we actually reached out to people all over the internet, not just Cisco customers, because it was so prolific that it was hurting the internet, and also because it would be just the biggest botnet of all time at this point, right? I mean, we saw what a botnet of, what was it, 20,000 light bulbs took down the East Coast last year for a while, which, by the way, we live in a world where a botnet of light bulbs exists. God, thank you, job security. You know? The funniest thing is, of course, in October, we rescanned, and now there's 4.5 million vulnerable hosts publicly facing. So we released all the information, contact everyone in the world, and now there's 1.3 million more vulnerable hosts stood up, publicly facing. We realized that maybe we should add the other ports to it, and did, and there were 6.7 million vulnerable hosts, publicly facing, external, right? So think how many people got popped with that? Well, Olney, who I talked about before, did just that. And this tweet was beautiful, and so I added this. The new metric, actors per JBoss server. Here's the list of bad guys that have root access on this one particular server that we saw. And he was posting more. By the way, if you have a Twitter account, highly recommend you follow K-Pike right there. The picture you see there is him in an Easter egg, which, you know, old guy in an Easter egg, whatever. It was him locked in the mall on Easter Sunday. It is a hilarious story. It's the first link on his Twitter page. My wife and daughter loved it. It's really funny. So follow K-Pike. He's brilliant and says a lot of really funny things. Right? Okay. Ransomware. I'm going to fly through this because, let's be honest, if you don't know what ransomware is at this point, you're probably lucky to tie your shoes in the morning, right? It's blackmail. Why is it a big threat? Because it's profitable, right? Why is it profitable? Well, it's a lot of reasons, mostly because people are dumb and will click the link, right? Right? Everyone talks all the time, we got to educate the users, right? How many people get all the fish me stuff internally and all that stuff trying to catch you, right? And all those things, and you see people get caught and all that stuff, and yet people still click the link every day because end users are stupid, right? That's how that works. Game changers within ransomware, the Tor project, not anonymous, but it does amount to privacy, right? It's relatively private. It's also difficult to knock down command and control infrastructure within Tor as compared to standard networks. Bitcoin, again, it's not anonymous, but it's relatively private, right? And that also puts you in direct contact with the criminal, right? So you pay directly to him. Okay. Quick aside, I looked up how much a really cool apartment in downtown Minsk costs in Belarus, mostly because I wanted to get an idea of what you're talking about in terms of the impact of getting paid ransomware and stuff like that. So I found this cool apartment. It's right near the university and the Capitol building and all that stuff, and it looks like it's off the set of Alias, like all chrome and wood and cool and all that. It was about $660 American. So I figure if you could ransom one person for one Bitcoin right now, it's about, what, $2,000 or something like that? In that realm? Yeah. It's, you can kind of pay for your rent, car, and bills in one go, right? So you can imagine how profitable that kind of stuff is in different third world environments and stuff like that, right? Exploit kit activity, they of course started dropping it because it was profitable. Why else would they do it? I had this slide because people talk about the dark web a lot. Here's an example of buying a DDoS weapon on the dark web with those cryptocurrency Bitcoin. I love that they use real news links to things happening as kind of a proof of concept of how good their botnet is. Like, check us out. We hacked this stuff. Isn't that cool? So buy our botnet with your Bitcoins. Okay, so the other thing about crypto is I usually get questions, so I try to fend them off with this slide first, is with Bitcoins, they say, you know, it's so hard to track and all that stuff. Well, I'm going to show you an example. As an aside, everyone that likes to laugh, read the Ranscam blog. Ranscam that you see there. This guy was the worst threat actor ever. Hilarious. We found him on looking up, asking questions about VB code using the username and email address that he later then used in the attack and all the stuff, and actually had that code in it. His ransomware didn't encrypt the hard drive, it just deleted it and then added this picture, which, by the way, again, if you're going to be a bad guy, be a good one. This has 6 different colors of red in it. That pisses me off. So I want you to hurt for doing that, right? And care about the ransom, it's 6 different colors of red, right? So, let's see. Oh, yeah. So this is what tracking them look like through cryptocurrency. Not that difficult, right? They even tried to, you know, wash the money and all that stuff, and everybody's like, oh, you can't follow them, and this is not, it's not difficult for him, right? Now, having said that, what if we, actually this was Lizard Squads, I think, but what if we make it hard, more difficult? So we talked about SAM earlier, right? And we saw that they weren't that evolved as threat actors, right? They had hand do a bunch of different steps and all that stuff. This was what their crypto wallet looked like by comparison. You can imagine what the really evolved threat actor ones look like and how difficult it is, right? So it's worth knowing. Okay, we have a really short amount of time, so I'm gonna go quickly through this. Malvertising, this one's really fun. Look at these numbers and stand in awe because it freaks me out. Click fraud was worth $6 billion in 2015. Billion with a B. So that's fake ad clicks generated $6 billion in business for people. That's insane, insane, right? Okay, so this malvertising campaign was really cool. It was done in ads and targeted sports, right? Got to have our football, got to hook horns, right? And then we got to have. They also targeted soccer and cricket, and then they also targeted college students with these movie sites, right? They're dead broke. I can't go see the movies, so I know a site where we can watch Deadpool here. Okay, and you watch Deadpool, but you also get malware, right? So that's how this works. I hate this slide because it's goofy and just shows that, you know, all I'm saying is that this slide, my takeaway is to always use the green internet because the red one always leads to getting hacked. So use the green button on the internet. This is what it looks like to go to CNN.com. I used to have the ESPN one from March Madness, but it was so convoluted that it looked really bad on most monitors. So this is how many websites that you land on when you go there, right? And so you go to a trusted website, but this is how many sites. So they don't have to hack CNN or ESPN or whoever. They have to hack some tertiary ad service that's sold to a secondary ad service that's sold to the primary ad service that's sold to ESPN or CNN or whoever, right? So this campaign is really interesting because they took advantage of that, right? Okay, if you don't know the path of how advertising works, I can't really help you. Again, you click a link and bad things happen. This is not rocket science. You don't have to click the link, but you understand, right? If you have a vulnerable host and you go to the web page, you're going to get owned. That's how web exploitation works. Okay, so there were 4 possible outcomes when you landed on the hard-coded 217.23 address. 4, okay? By the way, it's hard-coded because poorly run DNS providers don't resolve these things properly, and that will actually bypass their crappy device, right? Good. Okay, so the 4 things. First, you could go to AT&T.com. Anyone know why? It gives you legitimate traffic, for one, which improves your Alexa score, right? So if you have a bad point product that leans only on an Alexa score, you can jigger that and make that work, right? 2, if you have a junior analyst look at a ticket and there's traffic coming from this host and it goes to this website that you can't really tell what's happening, and it also goes to AT&T.com, what is he going to do with that ticket? Moving on down the line, right? He's got 6 more to go, right? Okay, so that's 1. 2, you could have gone to a 404 page. So you click Deadpool, 404 happens. What's the first thing you do? Refresh, right? Okay, so the 404 page happened to look like this. That's a lot of information for what is essentially the only thing you need is that HTTP 11404 OK, period. That's what they normally look like. This one was 400K, so we pulled it apart, decrypted it. It was a malware downloader. So you hit the 404, boom, malware downloader. Now you're part of a botnet, or you're mining bitcoins, or you're sending spam mail, or whatever you want, right? The last 2 pages that you could get were these 2 here. 2 different exploit kits, right? So the threat actor could own both exploit kits, right? That's feasible, but it seems like a waste of money because why would you do that if you already own one? As long as you can get the people to the landing page, you can own them, right? Okay, so what does that tell us? What is happening, right? What's happening is malware as a service, malvertising as a service. So they are your friendly cloud provider of hacked traffic, okay? So they'll forward traffic to your landing page for the low, low price of X, right? That's what they're doing. So they found a niche in the business model and they filled it, just like we do on the enterprise side of things, right? So, and they're hacking, and I can understand it, right? They pop a bunch of tertiary ad services and they're forwarding traffic. Then you go to court and hey, I didn't ransomware anyone. I just forwarded some traffic, and it's a slap on the wrist, and no one cares if you even get a slap on the wrist, right? So you can understand really quickly how that would happen, right? Okay, so let me see. I don't know if y'all can see it here. My final slide is just my Twitter account, so yeah, it's there. Okay, I had one question here, and then I'll take some questions out there, hopefully. And hopefully y'all got everything out of it, and thanks everyone for your time. I know it's a difficult thing. So my question here is, if you could only buy 2 or 3 security tools, what would you buy? I would get more money and buy more tools, because 2 or 3. But so I get this question a lot in terms of people asking me about my home use, stuff like that. And not to be the corporate shill that I am, because I was an OpenDNS user before we purchased OpenDNS, right? So when you're a home user, a small business user, all those things like that, you want to be not part of the 80%. You want to be the 20%, right? So 80-20 rule of things is essentially you want to be out of the noise, right? You want to be one step more difficult than all of these other people, right? OpenDNS by itself does that for you. That's not marketing fluff, and that's not me, like whatever. That's real, right? Take yourself out of that stuff and get up an umbrella. So that would be one of the first things I would do. After that, I would probably do something heuristic. So like if I was at home, I would use AMP, Immunet, those kind of things, right? So something that did hash checking and behavioral analysis and that kind of stuff, right? Those would be my two first options. Of course, mine would be a different answer than some of you because I could also look at the traffic and do crazy fun stuff with it, right? So I'd enjoy someone goofing around on my network, which I invite often. Okay, do any of you guys here have questions? Everyone's afraid that I'll socially engineer them if they ask a question. It's already been done. I know some of y'all passwords already. Maybe. Okay, so is that it? No one. Okay.
What's your opinion about two-factor authentication?
What's?
Use it to help regular users, customers?
What's my, so the question is two-factor authentication. What's my thought on it? I use it in all of the stuff. I think it's important to add a step. Anytime we can, it's a somewhat painless step in the whole scheme of things, you know? And to be able to validate it versus another device is really good. I like that a lot. I believe that password strategy is kind of a whole talk in and of itself, and I could do that sometime. But the two-factor authentication I think is really important. I think not only the admins, but I think all the general users should do it. More than anything, because if I can get a general user's account in your network, I can eventually privilege escalate because that's what I do, right? So I don't have to get an admin account day one because I'll get it, right? So that's why those things matter. And the BYOD stuff of the world is really, you know, everybody's bringing their iPads and all these different things. And so you have those things, and so two-factor authentication helps versus a lot of that stuff, right? Because I want to know if I'm physically logged in here and someone in Singapore logs in too with my account within 4 minutes, because I've never had a 4-minute flight there. Okay. So anyone else? All right. Well, I'm done. I want to thank Core tremendously for having me. It's a super fun event. Come see me and hang out. It's going to be an amazing day. So thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.